At the gateways of our great harbors, the United States Public Health Service maintains quarantine stations. The doctors in charge and their staffs of assistants must see that no disease is brought into the United States from other countries. Inspector George A., Chief Sanitary Inspector, looks in his files for last-minute information on the ships that are due to arrive. He keeps a health file on all ships that enter the harbor and knows in advance the health record of each ship. The station receives bulletins and telegrams from Washington, D.C., giving health conditions in the different countries throughout the world. Every year, about 50,000 vessels arrive in this country from foreign ports. Today, Dr. Mike and Inspector Sheridan are on duty to board the ships that arrive from foreign ports. They receive a last-minute report from Inspector George A. and are on their way at 6 o'clock in the morning. If there is a serious illness aboard a ship, the captain must radio the quarantine station before entering the harbor. With modern radio, the inspectors are equipped with a great deal of information before the ship arrives. Dr. Mike, the quarantine inspector, will examine the crew and passengers, and Inspector Sheridan, the sanitary inspector, will examine the ship, the cargo, and any animals that may be aboard. The first boat for inspection has come from Singapore, a plague port, that is, a port suspected of plague. It will be searched from bow to stern for rats, because fleas on rats carry the dangerous plague. Except for North America, England, and Northern Europe, most ports in the world are considered plague ports. The ship flies the yellow quarantine flag, a signal that it is ready for medical inspection. The officer will report immediately to the captain and examine the ship's papers. While Dr. Mike examines the crew and passengers, Inspector Sheridan goes over the ship itself. Cholera is carried by contaminated food and water, and so he will check carefully the plumbing, pantries, and kitchen. The quarantinable diseases are cholera, plague, smallpox, typhus, and yellow fever. The inspector is trained to judge from appearances the health condition on board. A ship needs good housekeeping just like a home. He looks for any sign of rats, such as footprints or rat nests. On a clean ship, it is difficult for rats to hide or to find food. The public health authorities have worked out certain tests for a ship. If they can find traces of 5 rats, they know that the ship should have a fumigation. Inspector Sheridan points to the teeth marks of the rats on pieces of copra or coconut. He signals the pilot on the boarding boat. The pilot radios the quarantine station to prepare to fumigate this ship. The radios on the boat and at the quarantine station save valuable time. This large ship is ready for a fumigation. The crew and passengers have been ordered to leave the ship, but there's always a last-minute search for people who might accidentally be left on board. All through the ship, the call rings, "Everybody out! Poison gas!" The fumigation squads have modern equipment. They inspect the resuscitator. This machine can be used to give oxygen if any of the crew are overcome by the gas. It is possible for a man to inhale only a little of the poison gas, and this machine may be needed to save their lives. Inspector George A. watches the oxygen valve to be sure the flow of oxygen is even. The men figure the correct amount of gas needed to fumigate the ship. The number of cubic feet in the enclosed spaces in this ship will take 40 pounds of gas. The gas masks are fastened securely, safety first at all times. A loose fastening might mean that a man would inhale a small amount of the gas, and even in small amounts this can cause the men to collapse. And these men handle the gas often. Notice as the man opens the can, he turns his face away. Then the gas discs are rushed to the cabin. The men work in pairs, so that if one is overcome, he can be rescued by his partner. Fumigation of a ship is like that of a house. Each compartment must be closed tightly. The men move fast with good teamwork. Their lives actually depend on each man's doing his work correctly. They drop the round cakes of gas into the deep holds of the ship. The men leave the ship for several hours in order to give the gas time to work. One man from the Public Health Service is left on board. A harbor guard stands watch at the gangplank. The flags flying on the left spell out the letters GOS, gas on ship. After several hours, the fumigating squad returns and opens the smaller cabins and the big superstructure of the ship. They rush away from the openings, for the gas sweeps out of the doorways. Then they start at the bow of the ship and open the covers. They turn toward the wind so that the compartments far down in the ship will air out faster. Everything is done as quickly as possible, because every minute of delay means a loss of money to the steamship company. It is anxious to unload the ship and speed her on her way. And now up goes Inspector Lowe to remove the cover from the highest king post of all. Inspector Georget is proud of his corps of men. They realize the importance of their work, and our government trusts them to do a thorough job. The superstructure of the ship is kept under gas 2 hours, but the big cargo decks and the hold space are kept under the gas for 4 hours. And now the men pull off the heavy hatch covers. Off they come, and out pours a gust of poison gas. On the men go to the next hatch. Heave ho, and it's done. The ship is allowed to air for about 2 hours, depending on the strength of the wind. Then Inspector Georget tests the air in the holds to see if it is free from gas and safe for the men to enter. He lowers a special piece of litmus paper into the bottom of the hold. The content of the gas in the air will tint this paper a pink color. He compares the shade of pink with a color scale on the bottle. This tells him how much gas is left in the ship. He shakes his head. It still is not time for a human being to enter the hatchway. But after another half hour, Inspector Georget repeats the test, and this time the air is all right. The men can proceed with caution. They move slowly, being careful to detect any odor of the deadly gas, which smells like oil of almonds. They search around the cargo. The rats rushed out of their hiding places at the first smell of the gas, and so are easy to find. The inspectors bring up some rats for examination. Inspector Georget makes his tests to determine whether these animals carry the dreaded plague. His trained hands quickly finish the examination. The verdict is good. No signs of the plague. After the ship has aired for several more hours, Inspector Georget turns it over to the first mate. Both must sign the fumigation certificate. The crew at this quarantine station strives constantly to improve their methods of work. Here they are conducting an experiment in an airtight tank room at the back of the station to find a quicker and safer method of fumigation. A number of public health doctors have come to see the experiment. When ships enter a harbor, there are many different laws to cover each emergency. Dogs, cats, and monkeys must have papers to show that they have been vaccinated for rabies within 6 months. If they do not have their papers, they will have to be vaccinated at the port of entry. Parrots are allowed to be imported only for the zoos under careful supervision, as they may carry a parrot fever which attacks human beings. Animals like tigers are checked carefully at the port of entry. They do not carry human diseases, but are checked by the Department of Agriculture for animal diseases. And so, every hour of every day, the outstanding work of the medical quarantine officers protects our country, keeps it free from the dangerous plagues that may be attacking foreign lands.